The Emergency Protocol, Ambassador. Kelrath of Music, the Vixari Empire, had witnessed many strange phenomena during his 30 cycles serving on the Galactic Council. He had seen species that communicated through bioluminescent patterned civilizations that existed in 3 dimensions simultaneously, and even a race that considered silence to be the highest form of art, yet nothing in his extensive experience had prepared him for the events that unfolded on that particular solar rotation. The Grand Assembly Hall of Station Harmony floated serenely in neutral space, a massive diplomatic hub where representatives from 47 different species gathered to discuss trade agreements, territorial disputes, and cultural exchanges. The station's architecture reflected its purpose, with sections designed to accommodate the varied environmental needs of its diverse inhabitants. Kelrath sat in his designated chamber, his 4 eyes scanning the holographic displays that showed the current session's agenda. Today's topic was mundane, discussing shipping routes through the Andromeda Corridor. The human delegation sat 3 pods away from Kelrath's position. They were relatively new members of the Council, having joined only 5 standard years prior. Despite their youth on the galactic stage, humans had proven themselves remarkably adaptable and innovative. Their technology, while not the most advanced, showed creative problem-solving that often surprised elder species. Kelrath had developed a professional respect for Commander Sarah Chin, the human representative, who approached negotiations with a perfect balance of firmness and diplomacy. The session proceeded normally for approximately 2 standard hours. Representative Thorol from the Crystalline Consortium was presenting lengthy analysis of asteroid mining efficiency. When it happened, every human in the assembly hall suddenly tensed. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable, but Kelrath's enhanced sensory organs detected the shift immediately. Commander Chen's pupils dilated. Her colleague, a man named Marcus Webb, gripped the armrest of his seat with unusual force. Across the hall, every human delegate exhibited similar signs of distress. Then the alarms began, not on the station itself, but from every human vessel docked at the facility. Kelrath's communications device erupted with priority signals as the human ships activated emergency protocols. Red lights flashed across the docking bays, visible through the transparent sections of the station. Within moments, human personnel throughout the facility began moving with urgent purpose, abandoning their posts and rushing toward the docking areas. The assembly hall descended into chaos. Species representatives demanded explanations. Security protocols engaged, automatically sealing sections of the station as a precautionary measure. Kelrath immediately accessed his private channel to the station's central intelligence network, trying to understand what catastrophe had befallen the human contingent. Was it a biological weapon, a reactor breach, an invasion force approaching from folded space? Commander Chin stood abruptly, her face displaying what Kelrath had learned to recognize as extreme concern. Among humans, she raised her hand, attempting to project calm despite the obvious urgency in her voice. Council members, please remain calm. This is an internal human emergency. There is no threat to the station or any non-human personnel. We require immediate access to our vessels. Station Commander Vorax, a towering Macarthian with naturally armored plating, emerged from his observation platform. His deep voice resonated through the hall's audio. Systems, Commander Chin Galactic. Protocol requires full disclosure of any emergency situation that results in code red activation. You have 40 standard seconds to provide classification. Chin's jaw tightened. Kelreth noticed her hand trembling slightly as she accessed her personal data device. When she spoke, her voice carried a tone he had never heard from her before. Something between embarrassment and genuine desperation. Station Commander, the situation is classified under Human Emergency Protocol 717, our main beverage processing unit aboard the UHSS Endeavour has experienced catastrophic failure. Silence filled the hall. Calreth's translator implant ran the words through its database 3 times, certain it had made an error. A beverage processing unit, the humans had activated fleet-wide emergency protocols for a beverage dispenser. Surely this was a translation error, or perhaps some kind of code phrase for a more serious situation. Representative Thoral's crystalline structure resonated with confusion. Commander Chin, please clarify. Your species has initiated a diplomatic incident over a broken drink machine. What happened next would become legendary in galactic diplomatic circles. Every human in the assembly hall turned simultaneously to look at Thoral. The expressions on their faces ranged from disbelief to something approaching hostility. Commander Chen's response came slowly, each word carefully measured. Representative Thoral, this is not merely a drink machine. This is the primary coffee synthesis unit for a crew of 300 humans who have been operational for 6 standard months without shore leave. Kelreth accessed his database on human beverages. Coffee appeared as a stimulant drink derived from plant seeds, native to Earth, containing a chemical compound called caffeine. The initial information seemed innocuous enough. Humans enjoyed it for its flavor and mild stimulant properties. Nothing in the basic description suggested it warranted a fleet-wide emergency response. Station Commander Vorax consulted with his advisory staff before responding. Commander Chin, while we respect your protocols, initiating code red status requires justification under galactic law. Can you explain why the situation warrants such extreme measures? Chen's expression shifted to something Kelreth recognized as resignation. Commander, I am transmitting medical data to your private channel. What you are about to witness aboard human vessels is a phenomenon we call caffeine withdrawal. Without immediate intervention, crew efficiency will drop by 70% within 4 hours. Within 8 hours, we will experience medical emergencies ranging from severe headaches to system-wide physical distress. Within 24 hours, we will have a mutiny situation. The word mutiny sent ripples through the assembly. Kelreth leaned forward in his seat, fascinated despite his confusion. How could a simple beverage create such dependency? He accessed deeper database files, finding restricted human medical documentation that required special clearance. What he discovered startled him. Humans had essentially integrated caffeine into their biological operations, their military vessels, exploration ships, research stations, and even diplomatic crews maintain strict schedules of caffeine consumption, the compound affected their neurochemistry in ways that made them more alert, focused, and productive. However, this came with a significant drawback. Cessation of consumption led to rapid physical deterioration before Station Commander Vorex could respond. New vessels appeared on the scanning grid. 3 human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the station's jurisdiction. These were not diplomatic vessels. Kelrath recognized the configurations. Emergency response craft equipped with advanced medical facilities and rapid deployment capabilities. They moved with military precision, establishing a direct trajectory toward the docking bays. Commander Chin stood straighter, relief visible in her posture. Station Commander, the UHSS Mercy, UHSS Restoration, and UHSS Lifeline have arrived. They're carrying emergency repair personnel and replacement components. We request immediate docking clearance on priority status. Vorex's armored plates shifted, a sign of uncertainty among his species. Commander, these vessels are entering sovereign neutral space without prior authorization. This violates at least 7 articles of station protocol. I understand, Commander, Shin replied, her voice steady but urgent. However, human emergency protocol 717 supersedes standard diplomatic procedures. This protocol was filed with the Galactic Council upon our admission. It should be in your database under Human Special Circumstances, subsection Cultural Necessities. Kelrath quickly accessed the mentioned file. There it was, buried in the extensive documentation that accompanied humanity's acceptance into the Council. Protocol 717, Emergency Response to Critical Caffeine System Failure. The humans had actually codified this into galactic law, and incredibly, the Council had approved it. At the time, it must have seemed like a harmless cultural quirk. Now, watching 3 military-grade response vessels approaching at concerning speeds, the implications became clear. The lead vessel, the UHSS Mercy, broadcast on open channels. Station Harmony, this is Captain Rodriguez of the Emergency Response Team. We are carrying specialized technicians and components for immediate deployment. Request permission to dock and deploy repair teams to the UHSS Endeavor craft. Notice something peculiar about Captain Rodriguez's voice. Even through the communication system, he could detect signs of stress, urgency, and what his translator identified as protective aggression. These humans were treating this situation as if lives hung in the balance, perhaps in their unique biology. They did. Station Commander Vorik consulted briefly with his advisory council before making his decision. UHS Mercy, you are cleared for emergency docking at Bay 7. UHSS Restoration and Lifeline, maintain holding positions. Commander Chin, your personnel have 1 standard hour to resolve this situation before we file an official incident report with the Council. Understood, Commander. That will be sufficient. Chin immediately began coordinating with her team, speaking rapidly in human language, patterns that Kelrath's translator struggled to keep pace with. The emergency response played out with startling efficiency. Kelrath watched through the station security feeds as human technicians wearing what appeared to be specialized environmental suits rushed through the corridors toward the Endeavor. They carried equipment cases, marked with bright red symbols, and moved with the urgency typically reserved for reactor breach scenarios. Aboard the Endeavour, Kelrath observed the crew's deteriorating condition through the diplomatic observation channels. Humans sat at their stations, their movements sluggish, their faces displaying expressions of discomfort. Some pressed their hands against their temples, clearly experiencing pain. Others stared at their workstations with unfocused eyes. The ship's medical officer moved between crew members, monitoring vital signs and providing what appeared to be mild sedatives. The repair team reached the ship's mess hall, where the broken coffee machine stood like a fallen monument. Kelrath studied the device through the security feed. It looked remarkably simple: a metal housing, various tubes and filters, a water reservoir and heating elements. Yet the humans surrounded it with reverence typically reserved for sacred artifacts. The lead technician, identified as Specialist Maria Santos, immediately began diagnostic procedures. She connected portable scanning devices to the machine's components, her movements precise and practiced. Two other technicians unpacked replacement parts, laying them out in organized rows. Fourth team member established a direct communication link with the Endeavour's crew, providing regular updates. Primary heating coil is completely burned out, Santos announced. Secondary pump has seized. Water filtration system is contaminated. We're looking at a full core replacement. A collective groan emanated from the watching crew members. One younger human, barely out of what Kelrath understood to be their adolescent phase, actually whimpered. An older crew member placed a reassuring hand on the youth's shoulder, speaking words that Kelrath's translator rendered as "Stay strong, kid, help is here." The repair proceeded with remarkable speed. Santos and her team worked with practiced coordination, removing damaged components and installing replacements. They calibrated sensors, tested pressure systems, and ran diagnostic subroutines. Throughout the process, human crew members gathered around the mess hall entrance, watching with an intensity that bordered on religious fervor. Kelrath found himself unable to look away from the feeds. This was extraordinary. A species so technologically advanced that they could fold space, create artificial gravity, and communicate across light years. Yet they depended on a simple beverage to maintain operational efficiency. It seemed simultaneously absurd and fascinating. As the repair entered its final phase, Santos filled the machine's reservoir with water and loaded the brew chamber with dark aromatic grounds brought specifically for this purpose. She initiated the brewing cycle, and the machine hummed to life. The sound it produced, a combination of heating elements activating and water beginning to flow through the system, prompted a visible wave of relief among the watching crew. The first cup of coffee emerged from the machine, dark liquid, filling a standard issue human drinking vessel. Santos lifted it carefully, inhaled deeply, and nodded in satisfaction. She offered the cup to the Endeavour's captain, a grizzled veteran named James Morrison, who accepted it. With both hands, Morrison raised the cup in what Kelrath recognized as a human gesture of celebration, took a long drink, and closed his eyes. His entire body seemed to relax simultaneously. He took another drink, then another, draining the cup. When he opened his eyes again, they were clearer, more Focused color returned to his face. He smiled, an expression that reached his eyes, and spoke clearly for the first time since the crisis began. Thank you, Specialist Santos. Outstanding work. Get this machine properly calibrated and ensure we have sufficient backup components stored in auxiliary supply. Yes, sir. Already on it, sir. Within minutes, the entire crew had access to fresh coffee. Kelrath watched in amazement as the transformation occurred. Humans who had been sluggish and uncomfortable began moving with renewed energy. Conversation resumed at workstations. Crew members returned to their duties with visible enthusiasm. The Endeavor's efficiency ratings displayed on the station's monitoring systems climbed rapidly back to normal operational levels. Commander Chen's communication device signaled. She answered, listened briefly, then turned to Station Commander Vorex with obvious relief. Station Commander, the situation has been resolved. All human personnel are returning to normal operational status. We apologize for the disruption and thank you for your understanding. Vorex's armored plates shifted in what might have been the McCarthyian equivalent of a shrug. Commander Chin, I believe this incident warrants a detailed discussion about human cultural requirements. This council has never encountered a species with such specific dependency on a consumable substance. Chin nodded, a slight smile crossing her face. Commander, I would be happy to provide comprehensive documentation on human caffeine requirements. However, I should mention that this is not the strangest aspect of our species you will encounter. We are complex creatures. Kelrath found himself making a decision. He activated his communication channel directly to Commander Chin. Commander, this is Ambassador Kelrath. I request permission to visit the Endeavor and learn more about this fascinating aspect of human culture. If we are to work together in this galaxy, I believe understanding such fundamental aspects of your species is essential. Chen's expression brightened. Ambassador Krath, I would be honored to host you. However, I should warn you, once you understand the importance of coffee to human civilization, you may find us even more confusing than before. I accept that risk. Commander Kelrath replied, already preparing to depart the assembly hall. Something told him that this incident was only the beginning of understanding humanity's peculiar place in the galactic community. As the emergency vessels prepared to depart and normal operations resumed throughout the station, Kelrath reflected on what he had witnessed. The humans had not hesitated to mobilize significant resources, violate diplomatic protocols, and risk interstellar incidents to rescue their crew from a beverage shortage. This spoke to something fundamental about their nature. They took care of their own regardless of how trivial the problem might seem to outsiders. Perhaps Krath thought this was what made humans so effective as allies and so dangerous as adversaries. They brought the same intensity to everything, whether negotiating trade agreements or repairing coffee machines. It was simultaneously admirable and terrifying. The assembly hall gradually returned to order. Representative Thorell resumed his presentation on asteroid mining, though Kelrath noticed that several delegates kept glancing toward the human section with new appreciation. The day's agenda continued, but Kelrath suspected that this incident would be discussed in diplomatic circles for years to come. As he prepared his report For the Vixari Empire, Kelreth added a personal note recommendation: when dealing with humans, always ensure their coffee supplies are adequate. Consequences of neglecting this detail are not worth the risk. Understanding the human condition. 3 standard hours after the emergency resolution, Ambassador Kelreth found himself aboard the UHS Endeavour, walking through corridors that hummed with renewed activity. Commander Chin personally escorted him, pointing out various sections of the ship while explaining human operational procedures. Crew members they passed moved with purpose and energy, a stark contrast to the sluggish, uncomfortable individuals he had observed during the crisis. Ambassador, I appreciate your interest in understanding our culture, Chin said. As they approached the mess hall, most species find our relationship with coffee either amusing or baffling. Take the time to truly understand it. Kelreth's 4 eyes focused on her intently. Commander, in my 3 decades of diplomatic service, I have learned that what seems trivial often reveals profound truths about a species. Today's incident was not trivial. It mobilized 3 emergency vessels and nearly caused a diplomatic incident. This suggests coffee represents something far more significant to humans than simple preference. Chin smiled, an expression Kelreth had learned indicated approval. Among humans, you're absolutely right. Ambassador, coffee isn't just a beverage. For us, it's woven into the fabric of our civilization in ways that are difficult to explain to species that haven't experienced it. They entered the mess hall where the recently repaired coffee machine stood in a place of prominence. Several crew members stood nearby, cups in hand, engaged in animated conversation, when they noticed the commander and the alien ambassador. They quieted respectfully, but Kelreth could see the curiosity in their eyes. Captain Morrison approached them, carrying his own cup of the dark liquid. Ambassador Kelreth, welcome aboard the Endeavour. I apologize for the circumstances of your visit, but I'm glad you're here. Not many non-humans take interest in our quirks, Captain Morrison. I am here to learn, Kelreth replied. My species values understanding. Above all else, today's events demonstrated that coffee is integral to human operations. I wish to understand why. Morrison gestured to a nearby table, and the 3 of them sat. Captain took a long drink from his cup. Before speaking, Ambassador, let me tell you a story. 300 years ago, when humanity first developed faster than light travel, we faced a significant problem. Space travel is monotonous, stressful, and mentally exhausting. Early crews suffered from what we called void fatigue, a combination of boredom, depression, and cognitive decline that made long journeys dangerous. Kelreth leaned forward, his translator working rapidly to process Morrison's words. I am familiar with this phenomenon. Many species experience similar challenges. With extended space travel, we address it through meditation practices, neural stimulation, or in some cases induced hibernation. We tried all of those approaches, Shin interjected, but humans don't respond well to hibernation. Our meditation practices are inconsistent, and neural stimulation had unpredictable side effects. Then someone had a simple idea. What if we just brought coffee? The beverage had been central to human productivity for centuries on Earth. Coffee houses were where ideas were born, where scientists gathered, where artists found inspiration. Why not bring that into space? Morrison continued the explanation. The results were extraordinary. Crews with regular coffee access showed significantly better performance metrics, faster reaction times, improved problem solving abilities, better morale, and enhanced crew cohesion. Coffee breaks became opportunities for informal collaboration and social bonding. The simple act of sharing a cup created connections that formal meetings couldn't achieve. Kalrath absorbed this information, his analytical mind processing the implications. So coffee serves multiple functions. It is a stimulant, a social facilitator, and a cultural touchstone. This explains the emotional response I observed during the crisis. The crew wasn't just experiencing physical discomfort, they were losing a fundamental aspect of their identity. Exactly, Shin said, evident satisfaction in her voice. You grasp it better than most species do. Coffee isn't just about the caffeine, though that's certainly important. It's about the ritual, the routine, the shared experience. A human ship without coffee is like a Vexari without their harmonic chambers, or a crystalline without their light matrices. As if to demonstrate, a young crew member approached the coffee machine, preparing a fresh cup. Kelrath watched the process carefully, the measured portions of ground coffee, the precise water temperature, the patient waiting as the machine worked, and finally the satisfied expression as the human inhaled the aromatic steam rising from the cup. It was indeed ritualistic, almost meditative. May I ask about the withdrawal symptoms I observed? Kelrath inquired. Your species seemed to experience genuine physical distress when coffee was unavailable, Captain. Morrison nodded soberly. That's the less pleasant aspect of our relationship with coffee. The caffeine in coffee affects our brain chemistry. Regular consumption creates a mild dependency. When we suddenly stop consuming it, we experience headaches, fatigue, irritability, and difficulty concentrating. For a ship's crew operating complex systems in deep space, these symptoms create genuine danger. Chin accessed her data device, pulling up medical information. We've done extensive research on this. The withdrawal symptoms typically peak between 24 and 48 hours after the last caffeine intake and can last for several days in a space environment where crew must maintain constant vigilance. This represents a serious operational risk. That's why Emergency Protocol 717 exists. It's not an overreaction, it's a practical safety measure. Kelrath studied the medical data on Chen's device. The biological mechanisms were complex, involving neurotransmitters, receptor adaptation, and metabolic processes. His respect for human researchers grew as he read through their careful documentation of these effects. They had not ignored or denied their species' dependency. Instead, they had studied it thoroughly and developed protocols to manage it effectively. How did the Galactic Council approve this protocol? Kelrath asked. It seems extraordinary that they would codify a species beverage requirements into interstellar law. Morrison chuckled. Sound. Kelrath's translator rendered as amusement. The approval process was entertaining. We had to present it before the full council. Imagine trying to explain to 47 different species, each with completely different biology and cultural practices, why humans need coffee to function optimally. Some species found it hilarious. Others were genuinely concerned about our dependency. On a plant-based stimulant, the Crystalline Consortium was particularly skeptical. Chin added, they argued that a species requiring external chemical stimulation for basic function was too unstable for council membership. We had to present centuries of safety data, operational records, and detailed medical studies proving that managed caffeine consumption was both safe and beneficial for human performance. What convinced them? Krath asked, ironically. It was a demonstration, Morrison replied. We invited council observers to watch two identical human crews perform complex tasks. One crew had normal coffee access, the other was in deliberate caffeine withdrawal. The performance difference was so stark that even the crystalline had to acknowledge the legitimacy of our protocols. A crew member approached their table, hesitantly interrupting, Captain, I apologize for the interruption, but Specialist Santos has completed the post-repair analysis. We have sufficient components for 3 backup systems, and she recommends installing redundant machines in separate sections of the ship. Morrison nodded approvingly. Excellent, make it so, and Santos deserves a commendation for her rapid response today. As the crew member departed, Kelrath noticed something significant. The captain had just made a command decision regarding coffee machine redundancy with the same seriousness he would apply to shield generators or life support systems. This truly was integral infrastructure for humans, Commander Chin. Kelrath said thoughtfully, I begin to understand why humans are so effective in the galaxy, despite being relatively new members. Your species doesn't simply adapt to challenges, you integrate solutions so completely that they become fundamental to your identity. Coffee isn't just something you drink, it's part of your operational philosophy. Chin looked pleased. That's a very astute observation, Ambassador. Yes, that's exactly right. We don't see coffee as a crutch or a weakness. We see it as a tool, one we've learned to use effectively over centuries, just as we use technology to extend our reach beyond Earth. We use coffee to extend our cognitive capabilities beyond their natural limits. But doesn't this create vulnerability? Krath pressed. What if you encounter situations where coffee is unavailable or compromised? Today demonstrated that such scenarios can your operations. Morrison's expression turned serious. That's a valid concern, Ambassador, and we don't take it lightly. Modern human vessels carry extensive coffee supplies, multiple redundant production systems, and even emergency stockpiles of caffeine in alternative forms. Additionally, our military vessels can synthesize caffeine from basic chemical compounds if necessary. We've made ourselves dependent on coffee, yes, but we've also ensured that dependency is manageable through multiple layers of backup systems. Furthermore, Chin added, we train our personnel in caffeine management. Crew members understand their own tolerance levels, know how to recognize withdrawal symptoms, and can implement mitigation strategies when necessary. It's part of basic space operations training for humans, like emergency procedures or zero-gravity maneuvering. Kelrath considered this information carefully. The humans had identified a fundamental aspect of their biology, built systems to support it, created protocols to protect it, and integrated it so completely into their operations that it became a strength. Rather than a weakness, this was strategic thinking at a sophisticated level. I must share something with you, Kelrath said slowly, choosing his words carefully. The Vixari Empire has been observing humanity's integration into the galactic community with great interest. Some of our strategists expressed concern about your species' impulsive nature, emotional decision-making, and what they perceived as irrational attachments to cultural practices. Today's incident could be cited as evidence supporting those concerned. Morrison and Chin exchanged glances, their expressions guarded. Kelrath raised a hand in what he hoped they would recognize as a peaceful gesture. However, he continued, I will report something quite different. I will report that humans demonstrate remarkable self-awareness regarding their biological requirements, have developed comprehensive systems to manage those requirements and respond to emergencies with impressive speed and coordination. The coffee incident doesn't demonstrate weakness. It demonstrates discipline, planning, and commitment to crew welfare. The visible relief on both human officers' faces confirmed that Kelrath had made the right decision. Chin spoke first. Thank you, Ambassador. That means more than you might realize. We face constant scrutiny as the newcomers to the Council, and incidents like today can be easily misrepresented. I understand, Kelrath replied. However, I must also report one additional observation. Humans should perhaps be more forthcoming about such requirements in diplomatic contexts. Many species aboard Station Harmony today were genuinely alarmed by the emergency response. Better communication might prevent future misunderstandings. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. You're right, Ambassador. We sometimes forget that what seems normal to us can appear bizarre to others. We'll work on better protocols for communicating our cultural needs in diplomatic situations. As their conversation continued, Kelrath learned more fascinating details about human coffee culture. He discovered that humans had developed hundreds of ways to prepare coffee, that different regions of Earth produced distinct varieties with loyal followings, and that coffee shops on human worlds served as vital community gathering spaces. The beverage wasn't just fuel, it was art, science, and social infrastructure combined. Eventually, their discussion was interrupted by an announcement over the ship's communication system. All personnel, this is the bridge. We have received clearance to depart Station Harmony and resume our patrol route. Departure in 30 minutes. Kelrath rose from the table. I should return to the station. Thank you, Captain Morrison. Commander Chin, for your hospitality and your patience with my questions. This has been profoundly educational. Chin escorted him back toward the docking airlock. As they walked, she spoke quietly. Ambassador, may I ask what you truly think about humanity's coffee dependency? I appreciate your diplomatic report, but I'm curious about your personal opinion. Kelrath considered the question carefully before answering. Commander, I think every species in the galaxy has their quirks, their dependencies, their cultural necessities that seem irrational to outsiders. The Vixari require harmonic meditation chambers that seem wastefully large to other species. The crystalline need specific light frequencies that require expensive equipment. The Mycarthians consume resources at rates that seem excessive. Who are we to judge humans for needing coffee? He paused at the airlock, turning to face her directly. But more than that, I think humanity's relationship with coffee reveals something important about your species. You are honest about your needs, systematic about meeting them, and unapologetic about your cultural practices. These are qualities that will serve you well in the galactic community. I predict that in time other species will come to respect, if not fully understand, the human devotion to coffee. Chin smiled warmly. Thank you, Ambassador. Would you like to take some coffee samples back to the station? We'd be happy to share. Perhaps other species might enjoy it even without the biological dependency. That would be appreciated, Kelreth replied. I am curious to experience it myself, though I doubt my biology will respond as dramatically as human neurology does. As he departed the Endeavor with a carefully packaged selection of coffee samples, Kelreth reflected on the day's extraordinary events. He had witnessed a minor crisis that revealed major truths about an entire species, the humans. Coffee dependency wasn't a weakness to be exploited or a flaw to be mocked. It was simply part of what made them human, as intrinsic to their nature as their curiosity, their creativity, and their remarkable ability to adapt and thrive in the challenging environment of space. Back in his quarters on Station Harmony, Kelrath began preparing his official report. He chose his words carefully, knowing that his observations would influence how the Vixari Empire and potentially other species viewed humanity. His conclusion was straightforward. Humans were complex, occasionally confusing, but fundamentally reliable partners in the galactic community. Their coffee dependency was not a liability, but rather an example of their practical approach to managing biological realities. 3 weeks later, a curious development occurred. Station Harmony Central Commissary, which served food and beverages to accommodate 47 different species, installed a coffee machine in the common area. Ambassador, Kelrath observed with amusement as more and more non-human species began experimenting with the beverage. Most found it too bitter or too stimulating for their biology, but a surprising number developed an appreciation for its complex flavor and energizing effects. The Crystalline Consortium representative, after months of skepticism, was discovered one morning quietly enjoying a cup of coffee while reviewing reports. When questioned about this apparent hypocrisy, the Crystalline admitted that while they still found human coffee dependency excessive, the beverage itself had certain merits worth acknowledging. Kelrath sent a message to Commander Chin describing these developments with what he hoped she would recognize as humor. Her response arrived quickly. Ambassador, welcome to the coffee club. Next time you visit the Endeavor, we'll introduce you to espresso. That's when things get really interesting. As Kelrath sipped his own carefully prepared cup of coffee, following the detailed instructions the human crew had provided, he reflected on the larger lesson of this experience. The galaxy was vast, containing species of incredible diversity. Each brought their own perspectives, needs, and peculiarities to the collective, understanding and accommodating those differences, even when they seemed as trivial as a beverage preference, was essential to building the cooperative civilization that the Galactic Council represented. The humans had taught him that seemingly small things off carried profound significance. A broken coffee machine had become a window into understanding an entire species, and that understanding, Kelrath realized, was the foundation upon which lasting interspecies relationships were built. In the end, the great coffee crisis of station harmony, as it came to be known in diplomatic circles, served a purpose beyond simply amusing other species with human quirks. It demonstrated that humans could be trusted to handle their own emergencies efficiently, that they valued their crew's welfare above diplomatic appearances, and that they approached even their dependencies with systematic planning and multiple redundancies. These were qualities that made humans excellent allies, effective traders, and valuable members of the galactic community. And if maintaining those qualities required regular access to a hot, dark, bitter beverage made from ground seeds of an earth plant, well, that seemed a small price for the Council to accommodate. Ambassador Kelrath filed his final report with a personal recommendation. The Vexari Empire should consider humans as primary partners for future joint operations. Their operational protocols, including their comprehensive approach to managing biological requirements, demonstrate strategic thinking worthy of respect. Also, their coffee is surprisingly good once you acquire the taste, and with that assessment, the galaxy moved one step closer to truly understanding humanity's place among the stars. And